Divine Rising New Earth.
Divine Rising New Earth.
I'm Anneka.
I'm Calista. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Or welcome for the first time. We still are a new and up-and-coming podcast, so I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of listeners are new.
True. Though we might have met in a past life, this might be the first time in this incarnation. So, greetings. And we are excited to dive into a topic that has been on our minds. I mean, we were chatting about it for a long time last night in the library, which is the apartment in which we reside. So welcome to the library.
We're happy to have you.
We're very happy to have you. And Calista, do you want to kick us off? Tell us what we're going to be talking about?
Yes. So this is not our first time hosting a spiritual philosophical podcast. We hosted Brainwash Yourself, and we are seasoned veterans when it comes to experimenting with the art of intentional reality co-creation, with self, with God, and it ties into so many things. It ties into the self-improvement journey, healing journey, manifestation, art form, and over time, like with anything, you start to gain skill and notice patterns. And we were talking last night, not for the first time, about a pattern that we started to notice, like a cycle along our journey that we noticed. And honestly, we should come up with a name for this. It's almost like a breakdown of the spiritual test to bless pipeline.
Yes. Absolutely, which is very much like an alchemical process, like a personal alchemical process. And alchemy is essentially the process of transmutation of something of a lower vibration into something of a higher vibration. And ultimately, they're different expressions of the same thing. And you can, take anything that you're given in this human life. I would say, honestly, it's one of the main purposes of life, from my personal viewpoint, is taking anything that comes your way and making it into gold, like learning how to have that Midas touch to where someone can throw anything at you and you can turn it into a blessing, even just through your own perception. And a lot of what we like to do, I think that we're really passionate about that, because when you are able to have that power within yourself, you know that it doesn't matter what comes, it doesn't matter what you experience. You don't live your life on a whim, essentially feeling as if your external circumstances are going to determine how you feel, are going to determine whether your life goes well. You're like, I have this power within me that I've cultivated, and that means that everything is going to be golden no matter what, because I will take whatever I'm given and I will see it as a blessing. I'll accept it as a blessing, and I'll also turn it into a blessing. And what we're talking about, I think, in this test to bless pipeline is because, which we talked about a lot in our last podcast, Brainwash Yourself, and we'll continue to talk about forever because it's so important, until we're all, in the total space of, mental purity, where we're like vibrating at the divine mind, where we don't necessarily have to repattern so much anymore. But we talk a lot about how, even though we might have so many consciously positive intentions for ourselves and consciously positive beliefs, there's a lot in the subconscious that sometimes is programmed into us, almost all the time programmed into us without our knowing, that we just absorbed from when we were younger, or didn't realize we were picking up, that is operating on a different program. And so when we kind of start to shift and change that, that's oftentimes, and expand and evolve, which is just the nature of the human, is to, no matter what level you at or how much transformation you've gone through, there's this next level you can go to. And as we're going on that journey of consistently reprogramming, shifting our energy, healing, redirecting, we go through this test to bless pipeline.
Yes, and I think the test to blessed pipeline was kind of like an early observation of this cycle, which is It's the spiritual test to blessed pipeline, which you guys might be familiar with the concept of a spiritual test, where it's like your life curriculum in Earth School, where we all are so unique and we have certain lessons where there's certain repeating patterns in our life where in hindsight we look back and we see, oh, that was the same lesson as from the previous situation. And we know that there's this certain lesson that we're learning, and life will give you the perfect situation to test if you have actually integrated and embodied the lesson that it's been teaching you. So what happens is when you've been working on learning your lesson, it can feel like you are being tested, and it's just a good mindset to remember when things seem very challenging in life, that this is like a spiritual test to see whether or not you've learned your lesson. And then, as you may have had this experience, if you repeat your same pattern from the past and don't learn your lesson, the cycle keeps repeating. But if you behave differently and break the cycle and behave as if you learned your lesson, what then happens is you receive a blessing that has been blocked. Kind of, it's like life being a video game. Like, you get to that next level where you are provided with what you have, one of your heart's desires, and the way to get to that next level, like this challenge of this level, is to handle that spiritual test. And I think the amazing thing about it is faith is a huge factor, because a true spiritual test, when you are learning your lesson, is it actually seems like, in many cases, you are sacrificing your heart's desires. It doesn't seem like, oh, I do this, I get my heart's desires, easy, no problem. It seems like you are sacrificing your heart's desires because your awareness has leveled up to the point where you can't repeat the old pattern. You have too high of a standard for yourself that you will take an earthly loss to hold yourself to that higher standard. And then you get blessed. So it's amazing. And I think as we identified that amazing phrase, spiritual test to blessed pipeline, and had more awareness in our spiritual test, like, I feel like our awareness came to more subtleties. And we had noticed in the past on the self-improvement manifestation journey this sense of like plateauing at times, and then major breakthroughs, and then wobbling. And I feel like we have been able to connect it all together more in detail in kind of this life cycle of the spiritual test to blessed plateau, breakthrough, wobble, pipeline experience.
Yeah. These like intricate energies of what you may also similarly experienced as you're going through this process. And why it's so vital to start to become aware of these patterns is because then, instead of going through your life and feeling like, oh, I'm doing really well, and then like, oh, I'm not doing as well anymore, oh my God, what's going on? And then all of a sudden, like, oh my God, I've been doing so many things to improve myself and to get in a better mind state and to up level my self-worth and my vision and my dreams and my habits and all these things. Like, why are all these things like happening to me? And that's one thing we definitely want to stay out, and it's like so out in the new earth, is the victim mentality, because you always want to hold the position. You always have options, you always have choices, you always have sovereignty, no matter what happens. Like, some things do happen outside of our like conscious control, but you always have agency within that. And
even if it's only how you're viewing it.
100%.
And some things are extremely painful, hard, messed up lessons.
Yes.
That honestly, you're braver than the Marines to be going through that. And we still have full faith in your power.
Yes.
To choose how at least you look at it in a way that can be more or less empowering.
Exactly. 100%. Like, that's the first layer is the lens, or just like how you're even going to move through something, or like choosing to be with something. And that's that. Anyway, so we are talking about why it is so vital to become aware of these patterns. It's because then, which we've experienced personally, when you're going through the spaces where it feels like everything's, because sometimes when you go in on this stuff so hard, like sometimes everything will almost feel like it's like falling to pieces around you. And when you really start to become aware of the alchemical process, that starts to become a legitimately good sign. And that is really, really powerful, because it's like on paper, everything is going wrong, but I know that means that something great is right around the corner. And it's legitimately possible to hold that perspective where when it seems like things in the 3D are going totally awry. And that's, I guess, the faith piece. But it's also, if you're less of a faith person and more of a data person, you can just watch that process happen in your own life and then take that data from those experiences and be like, okay, this is how I have witnessed the cycles move, so I can intelligently not freak out during this stage of the process, because this stage of the process is inevitable. Like, life is not, I mean, having a relationship to, you know, even a higher energy, a higher perspective, having faith in a higher power doesn't mean that you think life is just going to bring you things that are going to bring you instant gratification all the time. You know, there's a lot of polarity on this planet, and one can cultivate a perspective and an awareness that allows one to enjoy every part of it, or at least, even if it's like a deep soul enjoyment of like witnessing the
growth.
Yeah, the growth. Like, it doesn't mean that necessarily something isn't painful or something isn't, make you feel even angry, but you could still, on that soul level, that higher consciousness witness perspective, enjoy that for what it is, because our soul can actually enjoy the huge spectrum of experience and didn't necessarily just want to have like this one flavor of experience. And that's almost, one of the gifts of being human in this lifetime is this huge rainbow of colors. So when you start to become aware that you're safe within the test to bless pipeline, not just in like the one section where you're getting your blessing, it also makes the blessing that much better when you're like, oh, I'm not just going to be happy when my blessing comes. I'm going to like already know that it's coming and already feel grateful for the whole process as it is. It almost feels like then when it comes, it's that much sweeter. Because if you look at your life and you're like, oh, I was only happy in those moments that like I got what I wanted. I mean, that's not like what I personally find satisfaction in. Like, I find deep satisfaction when I like see that I had faith in the hard times, and then I'm in the good times and I'm like, yeah, I also have faith here. Like, I'll have faith anywhere.
Well, yes, it also prevents from enjoying the actual happy moments when you're clinging to them and you're already kind of like mourning them as soon as they're happening because you're so scared this is going to be the happiest moment you ever get. But when you are able to, it's like, yeah, we practice detachment when we're suffering. We also practice it when we are feeling very happy, wish fulfilled, because we are going to go through the cycle again. And on the other side of that is going to be an even greater form of our blessing. It's like this death rebirth process. And that makes it so you can be present without clinging to the good, positive, beautiful experiences as well. Because I think there's also that experience of having everything you ever wanted and not feeling how you thought you would feel. And that is also what can be avoided just by cultivating this like presence and gratitude of all different types of moments as part of this bigger process that does lead to ultimately your higher joy and fulfillment.
100%. And it absolutely is like a practice too. Like it can seem so, some people may be so used to having that perspective, and then some people might be like, oh, that just like, that seems like so nice to talk about, but like, how do you actually do it? It's genuinely the way you look at things and the way you perceive things and the thought process that you have around them is a practice, and it creates neural networks in your brain. So if you genuinely start from ground zero, it's like, what can you appreciate in the moment that you're in right now? And it genuinely just starts to build to when then you'll like automatically start noticing it on your own without having to consciously do it. And then all of a sudden it's like you're just so absorbed in awe of the phenomena of life itself, regardless of what it looks like, that you're almost not even so tripped up about like what stage you are, whether you're being tested, whether you're being blessed. You're like feeling as if it's all wildly entertaining in a way, and a gift.
I think to cultivate whole total presence, everything always looks miraculous because this reality is insane. And that is like goals. But at the very least, like Anneka and I brainwashed ourselves. Like we always joke, I'm like, I could be, and you know, I am blessed in my physical reality. Thank you, God. And God forbid I do end up in like a very brutal, horrible situation. But we always joke, I've brainwashed myself so deeply. My mind is programmed by default, even when I'm wobbling, struggling, crying, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I'll be crying in my bed, struggling at times, you know, whatever. And it's like my mind by default is just running these programs of all of this is coming up for release. I'm learning these lessons that will be an embodied aspect of my higher self that will have all my desires and goals and blah, 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 blah. So that at least is good.
Yeah. You're running a program that like, it's always going to give you energy, your perspective.
It's setting you up for success.
Exactly.
You're going to seize opportunities when you see them because you don't have your blinders on of, oh, woe is me. Like no opportunity ever comes my way. And it's like knocking on your door and it's like, oh, go away. I don't know what that could be, but it's certainly not an opportunity. Like those never come for me. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
No, exactly. That's so true. And that's the one thing about the pipeline is how Calista said, when something comes up and then you act the same way within the circumstances that present itself to you, and even if it looks a little bit different, but the energy of the situation is still the same and you act the same way, which honestly, if you don't implement some sort of, I feel like, practice to help you change the habitual patterning within you, it kind of is hard to just like consciously make a different choice. That's why we talk about subliminals, you know, Kundalini yoga, meditation, because all of those things like actually help to give you the power to make the change and to like actually start to repattern you so that you are actually able to make different choices. Because the how is just as important as the why. But when you do, or even more important, arguably, and if you show up to the situation with a similar energy to the way that you always have in the past, even if it's a slightly different, like cloaked situation that looks a little bit different, you'll often experience some form of the same thing. And that's what, you know, we all want to be really honest with ourselves. That's what's behind when people think, why does blank always happen to me? Which Calista was just saying, like, opportunities never come my way. If you ever think this always happens to me or this never happens to me, that is a pattern that's showing up because of this cycle that we're talking about. And so that's why we so encourage looking within, not because it's like you have to blame yourself. It's never about blame. It's never about shame. It's about knowing that you're the only one with the power to change your situation. And we want that for you, and we want that for ourselves. We want that for everyone.
And it's so much easier than you think. And that's why we made Brainwash Yourself is, let's say Let's say you think people never like me, I can never make new friends. And I use that as an example because I encountered someone recently who was running that program. You don't have to go out and make new friends to prove to yourself to change that belief. That would be hard. You can just decide to start saying to yourself, even though you don't believe it, every day, people love me. I make new friends every day. It's so easy for me to make new friends. And then just see what happens. Like, that takes almost no effort. And that's why it's so great. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you're going from the root out. So instead of having to prove yourself externally so that then you can hold that belief, you already changed that belief, which is less shaky, because sometimes then if you like try to change it with some external thing, the subconscious thought that you had might still like sabotage it somewhere down along the line, hopefully not. But it's also just really cool to start to watch the magic that starts to happen there, because then that's when you really start to realize that like all the power is within, and like the programs that we run in our mind really do influence our reality. And like Calista was saying, the whole everyday thing. Yeah, I mean, listen to Brainwash Yourself, but essentially we also have an episode in Divine Rising New Earth called Brainwash Yourself. But the repetition is really important, because our life is very much so a reflection of our repetition, honestly. Yeah.
It is. And test this stuff out and experiment with this stuff. But the thing is, this stuff is energy based. So like, I love what you were saying about faith. It's like, this stuff is energy based. You can't lie to yourself. If you can cultivate and practice true faith just for the sake of experimentation and run some experiments, you will see that the benefits of true faith are extremely data and science backed if you run your own scientific experiment and gather some data. But in order to do that, you need to be able to actually practice in some situations having faith. So definitely start there, and I think would be very beneficial.
Totally.
And I loved also how you were bringing up alchemy, because I was thinking about that a lot recently. This idea of lead into gold and this ancient art of alchemy, kind of like a magical chemistry where these like ancient wizards are like brewing these potions with these tools to try and turn lead into gold. And it is often used as a metaphor in like esoteric circles where people are studying these esoteric philosophies, energetic arts. The physical process of turning lead into gold is used as a metaphor for this alchemical process of turning your breakdown to your breakthrough, your mess to your masterpiece, or like all these things people are saying, where you take just this raw material that might look kind of ugly, and then you turn it into something so beautiful, so divine, like the lump of coal and the pressure into the beautiful sparkling diamond. And in chemistry and physics, we know about these laws like energy can't be created or destroyed, and it changing form and pressure building up. And like, if enough thermal nuclear energy builds up with enough pressure, there will be an explosion where all that energy will have to transform into like kinetic energy and sound energy. That is how the universe works, because change is the only constant. It's all this energy constantly moving and shifting form. And I think that in our physical, chemical laws, there is like a failure to account for things like prayer energy, thought energy, and all of these things that are very real and very powerful, and these patterns and the way all these things interact. That's why like decluttering and feng shui works, because like this energy is literally like bouncing off things and flowing in different directions, and impacting things. Like these subtle energies that we can't see are interacting also with the physical world. And these patterns are so complex that the conscious mind, the human mind, is not equipped. Like, you would need an insane supercomputer to track these patterns like we have never come close to inventing. And I think that that is really the art of the alchemist, like, to be able to just shift a thought or shift a small thing just by like a certain word or a look to someone, or like cleaning something up or like beautifying something. Like, I feel like a true alchemist can follow their intuition to know how to shift the energy in this way that will interact with this extremely complex pattern to influence these outcomes in this very high, sacred, beautifying way. Like, when we think of chemical interactions and the laws of physics, we can't think how to turn lead into gold. But the alchemist is someone who understands those laws, and maybe they can hold a certain magic in their vibration, in the energy of their space, that does influence the energy in such a way that does create this shift. That could also just be a metaphor, but I feel like anything's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. I love absolutely everything you said. And a lot of it is, realizing. One of my favorite quotes is like, be the cause, not the effect. Quote Yogi Bhajan. The actual original quote is, I think, be the answer, not the question. And it's like, you can shift the energy of any space, but that starts within you, like Calista was saying. So it's like starting by learning how to shift a thought. You notice there's a thought that doesn't feel good. Think a thought that's more empowering, see how you feel. And you learn to start like, oh, I feel, I'm feeling like, lethargic, this, that, like, how can you use breath, meditation, etc. to raise my energy, raise my frequency. The same thing with the thoughts. If like it's a thought that's not making you feel good, you choose a more empowering thought. That thought's of a higher frequency. So it's all energy, and alchemy is essentially going from a lower frequency and transmuting it into a higher frequency. But it's also like there's reverence for that thing that gave you the indication that you wanted to even transmute and then experience this higher frequency. So it's not even to make one thing wrong, but it's like you have the power to manipulate and shift things to what you want to experience and what can benefit you, and then ultimately all beings. So
that's so true, because you have to meet it where it is at each point in the process. I can't take a lump of coal and cut it with a laser and put it in a ring and say it's all there. You know what I mean? At a certain point, you have to see this isn't a diamond. This is a lump of coal, and take that next step and that next step. You might not even see the end result from the first step. You're just following your heart. Truly. Truly you are.
Truly.
Okay, so the spiritual test to blessed pipeline, and it's actually kind of like a cycle, but it comes in most handy at this point of the cycle, the test to blessed point. To remember this, I think. So the spiritual test to blessed pipeline, and this is also interesting because this is like the more passive receiving parts of the cycle, where you're receiving this test, you're receiving this blessing. The other parts of the cycle, I think, are more also like, the cycle is kind of like an interplay of co-creation.
Yeah.
So the spiritual test to blessed pipeline, you can really start anywhere in the cycle. That's our timer. Good thing we're finally getting to the point. But you can start anywhere in the cycle, and I think a good place to start is actually at the blessed. And blessed, this blessed part of the pipeline is also, I think, where you are newly settled and like locked in and embodied to a new version of yourself you've been working on, or goals you've been working towards, something you've been manifesting, or like a lesson that you have been learning. So this is like blessed / mastery. Mm-hmm. Like, so you have achieved mastery of a certain lesson or a certain way of being, and your reality is reflecting that with all the blessings and all the fruits of your labor that is like aligned with your new frequency. Mm-hmm. Then what happens is you plateau. When you plateau is when you get used to it. That's like the nature of humanity, is we adapt, we get used to things. When you plateau after enough time is when we hit boredom/dissatisfaction. Boredom, dissatisfaction, and that leads to contrast. We then start to see, as opposed to here we are living in what used to be our wildest dream, now it's just the usual. Then we start to see, actually, you know what? I think I'd rather this. I can. That's like not, I wish. But anyway, if you have a good awareness, like you brainwashed yourself, your mind state at this point, your mental story might be a lot different than someone who hasn't intentionally brainwashed themselves. You could get through this a lot quicker. How I would prefer to handle this part of the process is, great, I'm seeing contrast. That means life is showing me my new preference. Thanks, life, for showing me that my energy is more aligned with this other preference. That would be great. But a lot of times what can happen is we wobble. So, using an example of an emotional healing journey, we have come to blessed mastery where these situations that maybe used to trigger us, we now are totally responding differently. And let's say that we got our blessing because of that. Like, let's say you had like trust issues, fear of commitment that was preventing you from finding your true love, and you would self-sabotage every relationship, and you were like really doing this inner work. And then finally, you've gone through all these spiritual tests. This is in the cycles that you've gone through previously, and something comes up that would have triggered you badly in the past and caused you to self-sabotage. You handle it completely differently, and all those worst fears that were preventing you from responding differently in the first place, and all those things that you thought you might lose or never get, you receive as a blessing. Let's say that you handle this situation differently when your trust issues act up, and it gets revealed that it was something totally different than you thought. There's no need not to trust this person, and your relationship moves on to a beautiful next chapter. Like, you thought they were sneaking around, and turns out they were planning to surprise propose engagement to you or something like that. So you have been practicing your inner work. You don't freak out and be all suspicious, and you're like, oh my gosh, I could be losing everything. I thought I love this guy and he's sneaking around, blah, 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 but I'm just going to be cool. I'm just going to trust God. He's sneaking around planning his engagement for you. Now you're engaged. You have all your wildest dreams because you mastered your lesson. Then everything's going great. Everything's going smooth, right? No relationship issues, no drama, even maybe a little boring. And then you start to see, you know what? This guy's like not cheating. He's not sneaking around. But he's not really making me feel appreciated. He's not really making me feel beautiful. That's what I would prefer. I want to be made to feel like a queen. It's not just bare minimum being loyal. I want to feel celebrated in my relationship. And that's not how I feel. So we have our contrast. So let's say you're taking it from the perspective of brainwashing yourself, where you want to change your self-concept. You're like, I'm not going to go to my man and say, treat me like this. I'm not going to also say he's the problem. Dump him. Let's replace him. I'm going to look at my self-concept and say, I evolved my self-concept from this person who guys are always sneaking around on. Now I'm the person they chose that they're faithful to. But I'm the person that they're taking for granted. How do I change my self-concept to the person who is treated like a queen and totally loved? Like, I see it happening out in the world. So you go, you do your affirmations, blah, 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 and then you show up to your husband and he's still acting the same as before. He's still like ignoring you for the phone or the game or whatever. That's when you are wobbling, is you are like, I felt like I had come so far. I felt like I was on the ball with transforming the experience of my relationship through my inner work and through my self-concept. And this is the toughest part of the cycle.
Oh, yeah, because you're like, you feel like, you're like, I had made it. I had made it. It was all golden. Everything was going to be good from here on out. We are winning. We are confident. We are feeling empowered, accomplished. And now
nothing can get me down.
Nothing can get me down.
But people can act however. People can be shady. People can be messy. But I'm not, that's not in my vibration.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm bringing the vibes. Mm-hmm. And so then all of a sudden you can feel, and this is why the awareness is good, oh my God, I'm literally back at square one. I am like, you can feel like, how am I back in this state of feeling like I'm no longer the, like, absolute, like, sovereign creator of my reality. It's almost like I want this, but I don't have it. And so it's like causing this dissonant vibration, and it can almost feel like
it's making me emotionally triggered. Like this other thing can come up, and I'm like, oh, I choose a different thought. But this thing comes up, and it's very hard for me to choose a different thought because it hurts and it stings. Like, I could choose a different thought, but the hurt and the sting of the first thought is overpowering that one still. Mm-hmm.
It's almost like here you're once again dealing with something that needs to be tended to and released, and something new put in its place, so that you can once again reach this, like, other subtle, you can reach mastery over this new thing. And so it's kind of can feel like you're in the same place again, but you're actually in a brand new place on, like, another subtle layer of your self-concept. And so if you can hold, which we've had, like, whole episodes about wobbling, and this stage completely, if you can have the awareness that this is a good sign to be at this stage because I am alchemizing something within myself. Something is coming up to be alchemized, and especially because this contrast coming up, like, Abraham Hicks talks about this all the time. Like, the contrast is a natural part of life to show you where you would rather be and, like, what you want to grow into. So it's like, it has to be there. So you can be like, oh, not that, this. And it's this constant state of refinement. But we are essentially the frequency emitter of our reality. So oftentimes it requires alchemizing, reprogramming a thought, or releasing an energy within us, and figuring out how to be something new. That's kind of what it is to be able to, like, make a choice different than the choice you always chose, is to genuinely become the person that wouldn't choose that. And that also comes with, like, a little bit of a death, because, like, a part of you is dying away. And so no wonder this stage is like a wobble. There's a lot going on.
Totally. Yeah. And it can seem like you're going backwards. Like, let's say she's like, why isn't he giving me attention now that we're married? Maybe he's not interested. Maybe he wished he would have married someone else. Like, then she's like, what's happening to me? Like, did I lose my progress? Like, I thought that I had healed my trust issues. Like, what? Now he's literally married to me, and I still can't think that, like, I'm the one he chose. Like, so you think you're going backwards, but actually we can always develop skills, right? There's situations that we handle differently because we gain the skills that we didn't have before to identify and respond to the situations differently. So you can think of it as learning a new skill. we did an episode on Brainwash Yourself of the 4 stages of learning. The first stage is you don't know what you don't know. I saw this insane video of this woman hand making lace. If you don't know the process of hand making lace, you really don't know what it entails. You know what I mean? It's just not in your awareness. You go to do it for the first time and it's extremely hard. It's like, it feels like this deficit that before you didn't even know you had.
Because you were ignorant to the fact that, like, there are all these things you don't know how to do. And then you see the vastness of what you now don't know. Yeah. And you're actually a step ahead of when you didn't know what you didn't know. But it seems like it's more overwhelming.
It seems like you were, like, for all you knew, 10 steps away from learning how to make lace. And now that you know all that, you're actually 450 steps away. So you feel like you're more steps away. Yeah. But no, you're not.
Because you're just becoming aware of something you weren't aware of previously.
You used to be 451 steps behind.
Exactly.
So this lady, she had never been in this situation before, married. She didn't know what feelings were going to come up. Because she had never been able to master this skill. She had never reached this level of the video game. She's so much further past where she used to be. But now she has this whole different viewpoint. She sees this whole new map of this next level, and she doesn't have the skills to navigate it. So that's how, when you try to make lace, imagine your first lace. It's going to be a huge knot and a mess. That's also what happens when we wobble, is we're practicing a new skill. We're given new situations, and we try it out the first time, and we fail. She goes and tries to divine feminine energy, secure, confident, to get better energy from her husband. Doesn't get it the first time. Ends up being a brat, throwing a fit. And she's like, oh, like the meme, that wasn't very demure. That wasn't very mindful of me. You know what I mean? Despite the best intentions. So those times can be tough. That is the mindset we need to have of, like, pro-failure attitude. Give yourself a failure point. I care about this. I'm doing my best. I'm out of my comfort zone and I'm taking risks. That's why I'm in the position to fail in the first place. That is what is the secret to my success, that I am brave enough to put myself in those positions when so few people are. So we get up and we keep going. And that is when we start to see more clearly our room for improvement. And it starts to feel like we have a little more of a chance, and we start to feel inspired. So that's when, like, you finish your first lace and, like, it's all ugly and janky, but, like, you did it and you're like, okay, I think I can do better next time.
And you realize, like, how, like, it feels so good to feel like you're, like, kind of getting a hold of this new thing, that you start to feel so much potential and possibility, and you actually, like Calista was saying, start to feel inspired. Like, you're like, oh, I actually, like, can't wait to keep practicing this new thing and, like, experiencing this new part of myself, this new power that I have, this new skill, this new talent, this whatever. And it's empowering and it's expansive. And then you start raising up on this cycle again.
Yes. It's like we were talking about last night. Like, you learn to walk. Walking's easy. Now you want to learn to swim. You see all the other kids swimming. They throw you in the deep end. You're freaking out. You're drowning. You're about to die. Oh my God, bad idea. You have to doggy paddle for survival, right? And then you're like, okay. I can doggy paddle. I didn't, like, die, you know. Yeah. But I can see these other kids are, like, swimming laps, like, super, super fast. Like, I want to be able to do that. Now you're motivated to go get back in the pool the next day, back in the pool the next day, and you are practicing your new skill until you are able to master it.
Master it. Yeah,
and
exactly.
receive your next blessing.
Boom. And when you're aware of this cycle, you really, like, obviously, like, this part's enjoyable, but, like, we want to be able to just, like, start to witness the magic in all of it. And like Calista was saying, your awareness can influence how fast you can move through this pipeline. So you can start to move faster during certain cycles that, like, parts of the cycle where you might spend more time if you didn't realize that you were there. And
it is about, everyone's on their own time. You know, you can't rush yourself, but if you're finding this video, it's for a reason and you're ready for this information. And at a certain point, what we're talking about is about this certain amount of efficiency of how long can some people stay stuck in the same cycle, learning the same lesson, and how precious is our time and how much of our visions could we experience if we were able to go through this cycle in like an upward spiral without getting caught on the same level of the spiral between these three little points. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, when I start to feel bored, how can I reframe that as peace and contentment? Like, that is a major part of the cycle too that we fail to enjoy, is this slow part in between the blessing and the wobble, where it does feel normal and mundane in like a good way, where those are the times where it's like, how quickly can we take for granted that we're like living in our answered prayers and our dreams come true, and how far that we've come, and just our blessings of being safe, like not having these dramas and stress that used to be getting us down. So gratitude, peace, contentment. When this dissatisfaction contrast comes up, how quickly can we recognize the contrast as a tool we can use to show us our preference and align our vision and our frequency to that preference that is being highlighted by the contrast. Mm-hmm. Then when we wobble, how quickly can our mindset be like, okay, I love a challenge. You know what I mean? Yep. How quickly can our mindset be like, oh, okay, this is a new challenge?
100%. So like the contrast can like actually be looked at as clarity. Mm-hmm. You're getting clarity on what you truly want. The wobble can be looked at as literally the Tower card in the tarot, which always comes before the star. There's like the Tower card where literally the tower is burning and falling down to pieces, and then out of it rises the star, which is like this infinite magic, this infinite possibility, this new life. It's like when there's a wildfire and like everything burns down, and then like there's all of this new growth. And we just want to recognize that and like get really friendly with the wobble, because it starts to get really funny, like actually witnessing all the pieces that can go wrong at once, because there's very much like, this is where I think it's easiest to get stuck in the victim mindset. And when you can take back your power at this stage and try to see the good in it, and also know that good is coming, like if you can master that stage, like you're golden.
Yeah. And the Tower is, so everything that's built on a shaky foundation crumbles so it can be rebuilt on a strong foundation. It doesn't matter how tall you've built on your shaky foundation. So like in our marriage example, this woman, everything she built, her marriage, when she's not feeling satisfied, it looks like it could crumble. But if her marriage was only based on fear and insecurity of what she didn't want, she's afraid of being cheated on. So she chooses a man who didn't do that. That is a shaky foundation. As opposed to having a vision for how she wants to feel in her relationship, having a vision for the type of man she wants to attract, and then building a marriage from that. That's a solid foundation that could be her husband. So if she feels like this tower is crumbling, everything she built, that's fine. It might not really be. She might just need to reevaluate and build it up from that stronger foundation of, okay, you know what? I'm not choosing my husband based on the fact that he's not cheating on me. I'm reflecting on myself, on who I am, what I want, how I like to feel loved, what I love in another person. And I'm looking at my husband and saying, is that him? If it is, beautiful. How much more faith and gratitude for her marriage and her husband is she then going to have to build on going forward? That is like her tower crumbling to be rebuilt on this foundation, this stronger
100%.
foundation.
100%. And like, I know a lot of people who may listen to this have experienced this many times. And I think, I mean, if you're used to kind of like witnessing these cycles and being on this path of evolution and transmutation in your life, you start to become really friendly with the tower moments. And at least for me, I guess I can only speak for myself, but like I generally, like when something like that starts happening, I sometimes now even feel a sense of relief because I'm like, okay, all these things that I was asking for essentially in the contrast stage, I know that everything is wobbling because it's trying to come through. So I'm like, oh my gosh, thank God, like everything that I'm asking for is trying to make its way through. So like you literally think of it in that symbolism. You have the contrast, you're like, actually no, I need this, this, and this. And oftentimes when you're in the wobble, you're like, oh my God, like holy guacamole, so much is happening. It literally feels like I'm in a simulation, the hilarity of the amount of things that are happening. But then you're like, oh my God, I literally asked for this, this, and this. And you can already see how these things that are like falling apart, you know, sometimes it's very clear, like these things that are falling apart, like, oh, obviously that would have to fall apart if like I even had a chance to get those. Like, why would I even think that I would want these things to stay? Like, oh, that's just my human ego who like
when you
it
want
feels
a better
comfortable
job,
things being the same.
and then you lose your job.
Literally,
like,
that's a perfect example.
No, it's like, oh, did you want to keep your old job too?
Yeah, like let's get real,
I don't
folks.
think so. Yeah.
Like legit. No, seriously. And you're like, oh, but then exactly. So like that is the perfect freaking example, and it's really, really funny actually to like look at. You're like, let's just take a look at what's really going on here. And sometimes it'll be way more symbolic and you couldn't tell actually how they're exactly connected because of the energetics of life itself. It's like, you know, you could shift something in your kitchen and it would change the energy so that like you could get something that you wanted in like a totally different area of your life. So it's not always going to be like so obvious, but you'll start to become more attuned to the way that everything's connected.
Well, I think that's very important too, and that's actually exactly important for the exact reason of what I was about to say, which is at this point, it's also very relevant. We did a Brainwash Yourself episode called Get Stoked on Your Challenge. And it's this concept of the opportunity in the obstacle and the answer in the question. And the fact that these are like two sides of the same coin. And this idea of the universe always getting you ready to be ready to be ready. And it is just like what Anneka talked about of changing something in your kitchen, shifting the energy of something in your relationship or whatever it was. It's like, when you are wobbling kind of in between, we want to shorten the distance here. So your wobble could be seen as your room for improvement and your inspiration extremely early on in the process. And that is this mindset of viewing it as a challenge and viewing that as a good thing, because when we face challenges, we learn new skills, and it's this mindset of, okay, these skills that I will cultivate through facing this challenge are going to complete the skill set that will prepare me for what I would actually prefer to be experiencing rather than this challenge. So the example of the kitchen, let's say you're procrastinating your dishes and what you want is like a breakthrough in your career. The universe is getting you ready to be ready to be ready to be ready. You cultivating this skill set of like decisive action through washing your dishes is what is needed to prepare you to be suited to receive this blessing of your career advancement. So that's why when you like finally do the dishes you've been procrastinating, that's when like you'll get your offer letter, your promotion. And it's like funny because we know that thing that we're putting off and that we're avoiding, and it's like, oh, it seems like just try harder, like present better to your boss, go to more interviews, you know what I mean, to get a better career, you know. And also there's a certain element to it that's like anything to avoid doing the dishes and that's the crux of it. So just, I have a challenge like that I'm going through right now. Nothing too serious, but you have to be mindful like how much details you reveal about certain things in real time. But that is the attitude I am having towards it, where I felt like there was one area of my life that I was kind of putting on the back burner because I wasn't as passionate about it. And I would actually prefer to not have to be responsible for these other aspects of my life that I'm not as passionate about. But recently my perspective shifted, where the responsibilities I have are a part of my life for a reason. And for me to feel that it is challenging or feel some resistance toward putting my 100% into it and really giving this aspect of my life the full attention and intention that I would if it was a more like preferred or passionate thing for me. The fact that that feels like a challenge for me has now started to inspire me because of this framework and point of view that I know that the skills that I'll learn are then going to set me up for success in ways I can't now predict for my wildest dreams, my heart's desires, and that I can't just ignore and bare minimum a responsibility out of my life. I have to address it, do a good job, complete it, learn those skills, close that chapter, and move on if I want to upgrade and replace an element of my life that I'm seeing contrast, and I'm seeing that I would prefer something different.
Yeah. Amazing. I also feel like, I feel like also a circumstance in my life is the most hilarious. Like, if this were a movie and everything was dramatized to like 10x the point of each of these stages, like that is what is happening. And it's so funny to witness because I do feel like I've just genuinely watched it play out like a movie because I know about this pipeline and because we talk about it. And the entire thing, though on paper could be concerning to the average individual, like I know where it's going, and so therefore I already feel blessed, and that's the greatest thing. Okay, we really went over on this one. It was so much fun. Good job, girlie.
Hopefully you learned something. Thanks for attending Divine Rising New Earth Academy.
Divine Rising New Earth Academy. I mean, genuinely, when you popped out the whiteboard, I was like pretending I was in elementary school at my favorite teacher's class in the New Earth in my mind. Feeling so blessed. So thank you for being with us here, being a part of this.
Is what I should have taught us in school.
I know, like literally, it was like, what? I mean, this is the alchemical process broken down for the average girly boy, quantum, light being out there. Okay, we love you so much. If you have any things you want us to talk about, feel free to message us at Divine Rising New Earth on Instagram. And we've been putting a pod out generally bi-weekly. We might surprise you with a weekly. And we can't wait to see you next time. But until then, be blessed wherever you are on this test to blessed pipeline, on this alchemical process wheel we got going on. And flourish on. Mwah.